Lehlogonolo Malapile. I'm a HSSE advisor, currently working for Scatec, independent power producer in the solar or renewable industry. Hopefully you will enjoy and sort of join the conversation as well. Thanks.
Okay, so for me, how it started, when I started my career in 2013, I did not have a mentor. So a lot of the information that I needed, I had to Google or either go on a course to learn it. So my goal to to share knowledge basically. A few graduates have hit me up on LinkedIn, inbox me saying, dude, I would like to get into the field, or I've just graduated. How do I begin? I've got the qualification, I have no experience. How would you advise me to either grow within the field or transition? For example, the person might be a civil engineer and they've seen people in EHS and they want to transition. So it's to help those kind of people, how you've approached your career, best practices, and also advice that you can give anyone looking to get into the field or is already in the field but would like to grow a bit further. So mainly sharing knowledge, because EHS people tend to be in the shadows at times.
Yeah.
We are not as prominent as the accountants, your lawyers, and so on. Sort of like we are there, but we are in the background.
I think from my side as well. So it's something that have come up in some of my introspection spaces that I have. I think in Europe they're doing it much better than we are in South Africa or in Africa. It's like I've tried to join few groups within the African space or African context to try and see how they doing things in Africa, and also essentially because most people are actually from South Africa. I think it's much more prominent here than anywhere in the continent, and because as well the OHS space in the continent is not that big, and unless if you're in oil and gas, then those spaces are quite properly represented in terms of OHS or now.
And because now I'm seeing a lot more people in our field also on LinkedIn, also starting to post more, sharing best practices and the like. So I think definitely within the next 5 to 10 years, it should be a whole lot more prominent. Yeah. Okay, again, let's shoot in.
Sure.
Let's get. Lehlogonolo, thanks for joining. Thank you for taking the time to have a chat with us and share your journey with the EHS community. Could you please tell this community who you are?
All right. Um, my name is Lehlogonolo Malapile. I was born in there's a village down west in Limpopo there called Leiden. That is where I was born. Um, I went to school in that village. Uh, So I completed that part of my primary schooling there. Then obviously joined another high school there, and then I moved to Gauteng, Boksburg, joined the Hoërskool Voortrekker, where I finished off my high schooling in Boksburg. And I suppose as a young person, my aspirations in terms of planning for the future, I wanted to be a doctor initially. Um, so I applied for all medicine providers. Uh, Unfortunately, I didn't get in on time because I only applied in like January of 2009. Because I finished I saw your LinkedIn as well. We finished around the same time, 2008. So when I went out of high schooling, I went to UJ, a master's program, like from start. It's called homeopathy. It's medicine, but it's not conventional medicine. It's a use natural perspective type of medicine. So I was in that course for I think 4 years, from 2009 until 2013. Yeah. Then things did not work out. And also, as well, it was consuming a lot of mental power. So, I then exited the course. Uh, I did not finish. At the end of the course, you are dubbed as a doctor of homeopathy. So thereafter, a bit distraught because I did not finish. As I was sitting there with my uncle, he's a safety officer, uh, been with Translate for the longest time. So he said, "Hey, throw it out there. Since you got so much of health in already, why don't you add safety to that?" And so I didn't know what that meant, but in 2014, that's when the journey for safety actually began. I spoke to my parents and said, "Hey, sponsor me for the last time. This time, I'll come back with the qualification." So my mom, being a support structure that she is, she actually supported. I've done all the small courses that are required for safety so that you're a bit more empowered and have adequate knowledge. So I started with, I think, first aid, firefighting, incident investigation. Then I remember when I did my intro, there was a guy, I forgot his name, not very good with names, but I think I'm starting to learn that it's very much important to keep people's names, especially in our field, because we tend to need each other from time to time. So that during our intro to subject, a lecturer there at NOSA actually said, "Hey, you know what? Your mind can actually aid us a lot in the industry. So I want to challenge you to go after Semtech after this." Um, then did so well in intro. Then a couple of weeks later, then I enrolled for Semtech. Um, Semtech being a monster that it is, especially for people that are just joining into the industry, they wouldn't understand as much until they go through Semtech. I see other courses, but Semtech is challenging, and I think it built a bit of character if you go through it. Then did so well. I think my Semtech, I got it with distinction. It was supposed to be cum laude, but helped people in class, and then they got cum laudes, and then I got away with the distinction. So it still was an achievement for me. Then I suppose from there, I immediately went into a national diploma in safety management. Um, Managed to finish as well that one. Um, but I think a year later, I managed to get a OHSP. That's what it translates as well. Where my uncle worked, so they were hiring junior safety officers. Not much experience required there, but I went in with a hunger to learn first.
Yeah, hey, Semtech is a beast, man. Because I remember, because I joined, started off in construction. I think I already said as a junior. So when I joined as a junior, I hadn't done my Semtech. I'd gone up to intro to Semtech, got a position as a junior. And then because yeah, it was a cost thing also. I was like, parents were like, this course is not
Yeah,
cheap.
yeah, it's not.
At least let's go 50-50. Then when I started August 2013, saved up. I think I did mine December, yes, December 2013. Also with a distinction. It was tough, man. It was tough. But I think one of the things that also assisted me was that I just started in the field. So at least I had a reference point because I remember most of the people that struggled in my class were people also not in the field, so they didn't have the context of how this actually works. So okay, thanks for that. Um, then I'll move on to the next question. Um, tell us about your upbringing.
Uh, yeah, so as I mentioned, my whole, actually half of my life as a youngster, I spent in the villages, right? You know, when you're in the village, you get to actually appreciate the togetherness. You know, that there's a saying where they say a child is actually grown by the community, you know. So I grew up under the wing of my grandmother, together with my grandfather. I think my great aunt as well. So my mom had to go and get some education. She During her time when she was in school, then we were being cared for by my granny and my grandfather, my child. They were quite strict. You need to be home at a certain time and not be out until, I think, the longest time you can spend outside is until 8 p.m. in the street. Other than that, you need to keep up with the curfew and discipline as well. One something that they put forward. So unruliness was not something that they wanted. Else, yeah, you will be spanked. And that, so I was a bit of a naughty child. I remember we were playing with one of our neighbor's kids, and he literally slept while we were playing at heights, which we shouldn't do. And he broke his hand. So my mom had to carry those costs for that young fellow. So when I'm home from time to time, we actually laugh about that. Yeah, so school wise, always neat. I remember getting few awards and being taken to the capital of our province for awards for best dressed guy during our primary days, and won, I think, a watch or something during those days. Yeah. But besides that, grew up in church as well, and still in church, and making sure my kids as well right now, they are following sort of a similar trajectory. You know, they will make their own choices when they are older as to how they want to live their lives. But at the moment, under my guidance, we believe in God. I suppose even where I am right now is not by my will, it's by the will of the greatness of God. That's one. And I'm not shy about that. I know in my sacred spaces, I believe, and how I practice to ensure that my faith is intact. So overall, yeah, I I would like to believe, and I know that I'm very much disciplined, even now at this point. Yeah, yeah, that's it. I think when I went to high school in Joburg, then that's when I got to live with my mom for the first time. Yeah, and she's quite strict as well, so you can imagine she's in safety as well. Uh, uh, but on the transportation side, like she's a traffic cop. But her initial certification as a professional is actually a teacher. So she taught me a little bit in my primary schooling, but because in those days teachers were very scarce, after after she graduated, she couldn't find a job until she had to go down in Gauteng to be trained as a traffic cop around the 2000, early 2000. And currently she's a chief provincial inspector in terms of her profession. So I suppose safety runs in my family. Uh, on my dad's side, he was a soldier, safety as well. He did a lot of tours outside South Africa in years. So we couldn't really bond as much until he passed in 2007. So yeah, that point. But I remember my young days, we used to love having time together. Uh, so but in terms of safety, it's in the blood. I'd like to believe so. Yeah.
Nah, definitely, it's in the blood. It's in the blood. You are meant to be in the profession. Definitely.
Yeah. So although in a
Definitely.
different spectrum of safety, but still safety nonetheless.
Yeah. Condolence on the loss of your father. Yeah, it's a tough one because I lost mine last year. He passed away last
Oh,
year,
okay.
October. Accident.
Sorry, man, on that.
Yeah,
But
so yeah,
as well,
so
thanks. Yeah, it happens,
thanks.
and sometimes you need their counsel, but it, those days when you need to make the decision by yourself and knowing that if they were there to, they would support it, you know. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Okay. So we'll then move on to the next one. So then, okay, I know you said your uncle was a safety officer at Transnet also. So you've covered this question also in part, but so when were you first exposed to EHS and what were your initial thoughts about the profession?
The first time was when I spoke to my uncle. He took me on a sort of a journey of how it looks like. Because I knew he worked for Transnet, but it was not something that we spoken about a lot. It's just whenever someone asked, where does your uncle Amos work? And I was like, Transnet. Yeah. But I did not know the extent in which he practiced his EHS. So until I had to then decide that I'm not continuing with medicine anymore. So that's when we sat down and then he took me through his journey. And then also on the advice that I spoke about, that he said, you know what, you've done so much of health already. So I mean, I've done it almost to the highest level. Then when he said safety, so what we do in safety is ensuring that people are actually safe. They don't get into accidents to go to hospital and all of it. So you literally on the prevention part of accident. And as we spoke and finally giving into that advice, then I took it up with my mom. And as I mentioned as well, that where I went through NOSA and done a few courses there. And then the more I go there and, you actually attend with people who are practicing as well. And they would just recite some of their experiences. And then you'll be so inspired of how these guys are actually doing their work in their companies, because you'll find that you're such a mix of candidates in classes where some people are from construction, some people are from mining, some people are from aviation, some people are from manufacturing. And you see how diverse and where you can go after you have achieved all of this. So for me, that was actually motivating part, and it encouraged me a lot because it was just a mind blowing. Like, this thing is it so big that one can go into these different spaces and still be accepted there, you know? So that's how I literally then now grew more interested into this EHS during that time.
Oh, great stuff, great stuff. Yeah. I would like for you to take us through. So you began, your first role was at Transnet, you had mentioned, as a
Yeah, yeah.
junior. Well, if you can just take us through what were the challenges as someone new in the field, and I think you had mentioned you had completed your diploma also. I think you had just completed the diploma the previous year. If you can just take us through your experience as someone who was new in the field, what the challenges were, and how you overcame those challenges as a beginner in the field.
Yeah, so, that was a very, I think, heartfelt welcome into the industry. One, we went through like very tough interviews, and then you're being interviewed and you're talking about an aspiration. And most people, when you're just talking about an aspiration, like it's a wish when you first go into these interviews, and then you're like, I believe I can do one, two, three, four, five, and then I believe I can bring a different perspective into the roles, but you have no experience, so they can't measure how much of your power and hunger into the role that you might have. So obviously now you're dealing with that first. You're hired, you've got the contract, and then now it's like you need to deliver. And you're getting into a space where your uncle is a rock star, respected by everyone, you know? So now, obviously, your perspective needs to be a bit different, and you need to just show a different application when it comes to how you understand safety. So I think in my few months, it was mainly about learning. I've worked with an old man. He took me through the ropes. Um, I've joined his allocated project, and then you're not gonna be doing anything, so just watch, learn, read every document that you can read, that we're preparing, and then from there you'll start doing your own. Uh, so I think the approach was very good. It worked so well for me because now you would print documents and say, this is an appointment letter, and this is why we are doing appointment letter. This is how we prepare a sheet plan. Um, you know, you need to factor in these type of things. Uh, and I just watched for a few months and learned when we go to projects how you speak to people during DSTIs in the morning, the meeting, and how you actually implement your incident investigation methodologies. You sit in there and you see how an investigation goes about, like in depth. And with Transit being a rail transporter, so there's a regulator, a rail safety regulator. So those guys, they have very high expectation whenever an incident happens. So, you need to also understand on that regulatory perspective what could happen if there were to be an incident on the rail. So those type of things you take into consideration. And as I learned, then it happened that there was a project down in Northwest, my first project, so our chief engineer just decided, you know what, let's allocate this young man to that project. Anyway, the project's almost done, so he needs to go in and just make sure that we execute everything, and we have all the safety standards that the department needs to put. So I was luckily employed in electrical engineering department. So, and almost working with electricity, it it's quite dangerous. So I went in there, now having learned the processes, the standard of how work is done, and then just went in, guided the team, led the team from health and safety perspective, and we turned things around. And I think when we closed the project, under me, we had less incident. So, which then impressed the leaders, and they're like, oh, okay, there's something there. There's something there. So we just need to perhaps watch this young man. And I got given more projects, and actually kept on impressing. Then we joined some of the biggest projects that we had. I think we upgraded the Manjuva line. It's a coal line for the power station. So already there were like very seasoned safety officers working on the project. So it was just a matter of observing there, learning what is expected. And, we were working under ESCOM at that time. And if you've worked in projects that make it to ESCOM, you would know the type of standards those guys expect from contractors, whether you're a sister, fellow state, orange company or what, that does not matter. You need to ensure that you implement your safety as per how you described it in your document. And the nice part with that project is that we had also a consultancy company called Hedge. I'm not sure if you know Hedge. They are an engineering, health and safety. They're like quite a big consulting group in terms of project. So they manage big projects in the mine, big state-owned project, and they are standards, man, and they are safety professional. They are on another level. I think that's where now I've got to learn how a safety professional could be and could implement. Like you would watch those guys and just be inspired. And it's all about attitude. Very good with people. And if you're a people's person, you're most likely to make bigger changes in behavior or culture thereof in terms of health and safety and environment as well. Because sometimes as safety guys, we tend to be so focused on health and safety, and then we forget that, oh, there's environment. And I'll speak a bit about environment maybe later when we get to other questions as well. Yeah, but from safety perspective, because in large projects, you like to have a focused person in terms of environment. But in areas where, like now, in your role, I'm sure you have a bigger role in terms of environmental issues compared to if it were to be in a bigger project.
True, yeah, we always tend to leave out the E because I remember when I was in construction, it was purely health and safety. We didn't have an environmental person, but we sort of had to look after it because I know you mentioned ESCOM. We actually had a project. I think this was 2015, 2016. I could be getting that wrong, but we had a project at what was it? Is it the Arnott? Is it Arnott?
Yeah, Arnold.
I think it's the Arnott. That was my first exposure to the ESCOM requirements, and it was tough. I remember it was a back and forth. Our safety file.
Yeah.
I've never worked so hard on a safety file.
Yeah.
It was a back and forth. They would say, "Nope, yes, you've covered this, but we still need these few elements to be covered." It was a tough one. It was a tough one. So definitely their standards are very high, very high.
Yeah, definitely.
Can we then? So from ESCOM, We started off as a junior at ESCOM, sorry, yeah. And then can you just take us through the roles afterwards? Yeah, if you can just take us through that up until where you currently are.
All right. So, um, then as soon as I was, like I told you, in my Juba, we had quite a bit of a very seasoned safety professionals there. So I wasn't gonna add any value. And being as hungry as I was, then opportunity came within Transnet. There was also a bigger project, I think, just a bit short of R1 billion project in Kimberley. We were upgrading the line from Kimberley to Port of Mocha in the Eastern Cape. So I think the project as well, I've joined in that project while it was still, I think it was almost in the middle. So I've joined in and spent a few months there as a safety officer now. And when I was there, one of our senior for Cape Region, senior engineering manager, he said, you know what? Even there, we were too many of us safety guys. Yeah, and even there, it was under Hatch as well. So they were the agent who were managing the project, and still got to learn a lot from that project. Uh, but then the office in Cape Town was suffering because most of the deployees to sites were from Cape Town. So then they were like, no, since, you just joined and also we have enough people here. So you can just go and leave the office, at least go and leave the office and ensure that the projects that are still being executed that side, they are well taken care of and the safety is up to scratch as well. So that was my first time coming into Cape Town. Traveled here, then you're on your own. You need to start the system from scratch. So I built and I built. We've had so many projects that were happening at the same time. So, and my strategy there was just to ensure that at least in these projects, although some of them were quite small, at least we have very um, experienced, even if not experienced in terms of practicing EHS, at least they have the right knowledge to ensure that they can hold the site by themselves. So I started developing a lot of SHREPs just to ensure that where I cannot be, at least we have someone who's adequately educated and understands how to represent the system to the client there as well. So then there I've grown, and as the project is coming to an end, some safety officers were getting promotion, to other business units within Transnet. Some left, so you end up being the only one now. So from there, I became the regional guy working in Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and Northern Cape. So all the projects that were done for the region, I would prepare all the documentation for those projects. And in that space, we would do so much and achieve most of our objectives. And when you do stuff like that, your leaders are actually getting more impressed. And I remember, I'm sure you saw this on my LinkedIn, these few pictures of some of the awards that I've gotten under Transnet. So I think when we closed some of the projects in 2018, I was then recommended to receive a few awards to participate in the awards giving. So then I was recognized for my contribution as a safety professional for the Cape Town office. And we started with our business units. That's where I was up against people who has been in the industry for a long time. And because of my type of contribution, I managed to get the recognition on a business unit level. And then when it went into the bigger business, I was up against a safety manager. So I'm not even a manager that time. And I managed to get that. And whenever we move, I always try and carry my owls with me so that every time I wake up and I go and work, I look at them and say, you know what? It is because of this that I'm waking up on a daily basis, you know, and that keeps the motivation high. And besides that, also when we wake up, we go and work for our family. So that is a motivation and ensuring that wherever I work, I keep the same momentum, the same perspective, and just increase my innovation. So yeah, so as we're growing, I think then Tiger Brands put out a post. Uh, then I applied and showed interest for that. As soon as I got the interviews and passed through the program, I started. The role there was HSSE and risk manager role. So I went in there. It was an abattoir. I've never been in a food industry before. But, one thing about safety, it's universal. It doesn't matter which industry you're in. And that is one point as well, which we need to drive for employers, that safety is literally universal. What you've done in mining, although there's no blasting involved now, the approach is the same because it's all about saving people. And we know what strategies to put in place to ensure that you have a thriving system, which is able to manage your safety programs on sites. So, you tend to see a lot of, no, you need a certain specific, yes, you're going to need the experience. But in terms of, you might find that if you give someone a chance, they can even be a better asset than someone who actually comes from the similar industry, because the person only knows one way of doing things. They are not as versatile, and they're likely to move and do the same way, the same implementation. Whereas, when you bring someone who's seasoned, different industry can bring a different perspective to your company. But that is my view when it comes to that. So I've joined Tiger Brands after almost 4 years being at Transnet. Then it was an abattoir. So I went in there, I didn't understand much, but the nice part is when you learn the process and you can then start determining your risk points as you do your hazard identification, and then coming up and working within the system and ensuring that each process has, a safety system of its own, because in terms of risk levels, it's way different, like compared to other industries where you have a similar type of hazards. So manufacturing usually, because of the type of processes that it has, you tend to have a very differentiated levels of risk. So went in there, and now you dealing with the insurance. Whenever there's insurance meetings, you need to be in there. That part you have never done before. So now you start adding such things into the mix. You dealing with security, like head on. Contracts are negotiated by you for security. You need to learn about that contract management. And then thereafter, there's just so many layers there that you need to get involved in. And then in terms of strikes, you need to know a lot about strikes. So stuff like that, then they keep on building and building and building. And then stakeholders, your government, you're dealing with those personally. When Department of Labor is rocking up in your factory, you need to know your staff and ensure that there's no notices issued against you. And you get to interact with so many things there. So I think in terms of my experience, that's where I would say I've learned to be an all-rounder when it comes to being in Tiger Brands in manufacturing. So that one definitely is something I think I take everywhere with me. Um, then I've done like a year and a half in abattoir, and then I moved into beverages, and then that's a different industry as well. Although within the same company, but it's a whole different industry because you have high speed machines. You have a lot of processes. Your process line is quite long, so you are exposed to a different type of risk in beverage industry, but you still need to maintain and ensure that you apply yourself properly as well. So that helped to even broaden my perspective because you have a supportive team. And one thing that they used to say about me there is that the all-rounder that I used to know what's happening in each and every department. We would have an audit, and the managers will go like, "Hey, you didn't need me, in there because you definitely know what is happening in my department." So those type of sessions. And one thing that I've gotten up to doing was managing risk closely. Whenever we would have strikes, we would be in there planning the mitigations, ensuring that we're providing the company with a range of mitigations that they can deploy to avert all those strikes, and working with people that, one, if the team is not supportive, then definitely you're going to fail because no one will listen to you. The employees as well needs to trust what you say and be able to understand where you're coming from. If you do not win the employees, you can have management support, but if you're not able to cultivate the workforce properly in terms of safety, and that is safety, environment, and health, and being a newcomer as well, you should not look at one aspect of your roles and responsibilities. You need to look at all of them and implement them accordingly, and then with flying colors. So it helps to be interested in what's happening in all aspects of your workplace. Yeah. And then come to my current role. I'm part of the corporate environment at the moment. I'm a HSE advisor. Um, It's been a year now since I've joined my current company. So here we're looking at Sub-Sahara, and then where I'm needed to also feed into other plants elsewhere in the world, then you'll be invited in those sessions. And it's a learning environment as well. power producing. So now I'm bringing a different perspective, which is something I mentioned earlier, that you need to always, especially if you're new to the environment, there's that seesaw type of giving where uh, you need to learn, and you also need to bring in a different perspective from what the people are used to, because that stagnant mindset that companies sometimes do have, it tends to get away because now you have a different way of putting things together or in place. So I've learned, and I'm also giving back to ensure that there's a balanced flow of information. So now, yeah. And like I said, when it comes to strategy, you also need to make sure that you learn as much as possible, so that whenever you are requested to advise on something, at least you're not thinking operationally only, you thinking on higher level, to be able to give the execs and business at large advice when it comes to implementing health and safety, or ensuring that the ESG is achieved.